Hi, welcome to another Cup of Joe. I'm your host, Joe Tumalo, CEO of PG Partner. Thank you for coming back, or if you're new here, thanks for checking us out. I hope this is helpful in your work. My guest today is Catherine Katie Collins. And besides being super nice and super smart, what Katie brings to the table is her diversity in her experience with donors from a professional advisor standpoint, from a fundraiser standpoint, and from a consultant standpoint, working directly with families and donors. Enjoy. Thanks so much. And also, thank you to ThankView, our sponsor. ThankView. Check them out if you haven't. If you want to do videos or are doing videos and it's just taking a lot of time and work, ThankView really has a very simple way to create and distribute videos to your donors. Thanks so much. Hello, my friends. Welcome to another Cup of Joe with my host today. My hostess with the mostest, Katie Collins.
Good morning, Joe.
Katie. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Katie's company is Pathway Philanthropic Solutions. Yeah, and as I said in the intro, you have a lot of interesting perspectives from a fundraising standpoint, from an advisor standpoint, and what other standpoints?
Yeah, wealth advising as well. So yeah, spent 10 years as a frontline fundraiser in various roles, and then worked within a donor advised fund for about a decade, advising high net worth families on giving strategies, some NextGen coaching. It really ran the gamut depending on who the donor was. And then spent 2 years as a wealth advisor. So rounded out that experience with some deep diving into investments, which was interesting, before realizing my passion really is helping donors and nonprofits be more strategic, impactful. And so started my own practice late last year.
In 2023.
Correct.
Yeah, and you're killing it, right? You're doing really well.
It's going well, working with both funders and nonprofits on both sides of the aisle. Like, actually keeps me really fresh and gives me good perspective on both sides. So I don't think I would have done it any other way.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
What would you like to talk about? What would you like to share with our wonderful?
I'm talking a lot about the NextGen in my world, and curious, you've been in the fundraising business for a while, so I don't know, thought it could be interesting to chat through any different approaches you've used based on, if you're talking to a boomer versus a millennial or a Gen Zer. It's just something that comes up a lot, especially with the nonprofits I'm working with, where they're trying to kind of sift through a lot of research stats, but also figure out how do they, create collateral geared towards certain generations, or how do they think about approaching different donors? So just curious what your take on that.
Yeah, and I'm curious what your take as well. So I'm a baby boomer, at the tail end of the baby boomer. And I've been thinking a lot about, not just from a donor perspective, but from a gift officer perspective. My business has morphed over the last 3 years into basically all I do is make phone calls. I go to a party. What do you do for a living, Joe? I make phone calls. But that's all I do, because I think I'm really good at it. I like to think clients tell me that, and donors often compliment me. But sorry, this is not about me today.
No, I love it. You've got it.
My point is that a lot of 30 and 40 some year olds don't want to pick up the phone and call people that are not expecting their call. And that's all I do. And I've created a niche out of that. I have about 5 clients right now, maybe too many, that all I do is sit here all week and make, I love doing it. But I think it's because people, but the generation I'm calling on are baby boomers as well, right?
Yeah.
As a plain giving person, I'm calling on the baby boomers who are still likely, even though it's getting more challenging, to pick up the phone. And I keep wondering, I'm playing on the back nine, as they say, at this point in my career. So it won't be an issue for me, but beyond the baby boomers, what generation's after baby boomers? Do you know?
Gen X. So I think baby boomers was 1946 to 64. And then Gen X, they say, is around 65 to 79.
So what, from a gift officer standpoint, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what do you think fundraising will be like from a major gift plan giving officer?
Yeah. Well, I would just say, I'm an older millennial. I will share that. Uh, I think I learned just to get scrappy and figure out, how does this donor want to communicate? And I would say, generally, yes, for folks that are boomers or that silent generation, which is the generation above boomers, um, they do appreciate the phone call. They like the personal touch. They might come visit you in person. And I think with Gen Xers, you start to move more towards, okay, they like maybe email communication a little bit better. Um, Maybe still phone calls, but I find that, starting to move down the spectrum of generations, and then you get to millennials that they might like social media hits and they might like emails as well. And then you get all the way down to kind of after millennials, you have Gen Z. And so Gen Z, as you know, they live and breathe social media. They live and breathe being online. And so, in terms of what it'll look like in 30 years, I'm not quite sure. There might be a new form of communication, but I think at the end of the day, still, as a gift officer, I would think through, who is this donor? What have they shared with me in terms of how they want to communicate? What's important to them? And I call them cues and clues, right? Like, who is this person? And tailor each kind of, especially as a major gifts level, each communication to who they are and how they prefer to be contacted, engaged, all of that.
And what's a good way to find that out?
Well, I use the word listen a lot. Ask lots of open-ended questions. If you have the opportunity, right? You have that either email exchange, that quick phone call, maybe they'll come and meet you over coffee. I'd say listen. Ask lots of questions. What's important to them? How do they approach, like, how are they involved with this organization, or how do they come to this meeting? I think everybody has a story of who they are and how they came to that moment in terms of their giving. But I think it's important to ask, what motivates them? What's the impact they most want to make in the world? There are lots of different kind of toolkits I've seen out there where you can start to tease some of this out. And I do that myself, working with individual donors that I advise to help kind of create a strategic giving plan of who they are, what they want to accomplish. And once they identify certain issue areas and where they want to give, that's when we do, some research on what are the most pending, pressing issues of the day, and where do they want to give. So that's how I'd approach it.
And when you work with donors, do they tend to be in a certain generational cohort? Or are they all over the place?
I work in terms of my funder clients. It's a mix, some baby boomers, and then some kind of Gen Xers, millennials. And I do see some difference. I would say baby boomers give to more traditional organizations. I would say they want proven programs. And again, this is kind of statistically, anecdotally, there of course are folks that fall outside of these categories. But as you move kind of Gen X, millennial, I think there's a little bit of a difference I'm seeing, especially in interest in terms of how they work with nonprofits. So I think the older generations would be very loyal, stay on a board for many years, give annually, certain amount, and really knew the staff really, really well. What I'm seeing is a little bit of a shift with younger generations where they want to feel a tangible impact. They don't want to just give $30,000 to an unrestricted fund for a giant organization. And so I'm seeing a little bit of a shift towards smaller and medium-sized nonprofits. And I think some of the bigger organizations are getting smarter and figuring out, okay, they don't want to just give unrestricted. They don't want to just give to the annual fund. So again, like, what's that hook for this donor? Like, what's the fire in the belly? And try to figure out, then, is there a particular program or doctor or effort that you want to kind of share with them for them to support?
Good stuff. In my work, every morning I get up, I constantly sometimes tell myself, well, I feel like I'm trying to persuade donors to do something that they may not want to do, as far as setting up a visit. It's like, now when I deal with mostly 65 and over people who are retired, many are retired, it's a lot easier to get a visit with them. So people in their most of the visits that I get are people in their 70s, and we're talking about planned giving for the most part, or 70s or 80s, but mostly 70s. So they're retired, they have more time, they're more open to visiting. With the younger folks, I feel like, now I even say to donors, you need to feel good about whatever you're doing, right? If they kind of like, well, I know you're a fundraiser, what do you want? You want money, don't you? And I'll say, and then people say that sometimes, I say, only if you feel good about that, right? So yes, they need to feel good about it. At the same time, and maybe I'm old school, but the old days of you need to get 15 to 20 visits a month. I don't know if that's still a thing. I think it is a
I think
thing
it
with
is.
colleges, right? Especially colleges and larger charities for sure. But how is that going to change in the next 5 years? Or is it changing already where people like a lot of the responses are, no, thank you, I appreciate it, but I'm good. I'll send you a check. I'll send you a donation when we're ready. Any ideas
Yeah.
around that? Or do you talk to donors? Well, when you talk to donors, do they ever say, yeah, these so-and-so fundraisers just constantly hounding me to visit or to do something?
So I do, talk to donors where they get hundreds of solicitations in the mail, they get emails, all of that. I think for donors that have recognized there are some important organizations to them, I have found they're open to some type of engagement. Um, you have to find them at the right time, right? So, and also again, what's the hook, right? If they're a really busy businesswoman and they have maybe 30 minutes for you once a year, you've got to wow them, right? You come in, you've done your homework, you know what's important to them. You make the ask, right? I've been in so many situations where the ask is never made, which is fascinating to me.
Really?
Yes, with donors live at a table. Um,
Well,
just
excuse
really
me. They're like really excited and they're really into the conversation. And then people are like, okay, thanks, bye.
correct. Yes. Make the ask, right? Again, especially if you have 30 minutes with this person. Um, and, I would say also make it relevant to the donor, but also make your case as an organization. I think, again, a lot of the younger generations want transparency. If things aren't going well or you need funding for a particular thing, be honest about it, be transparent about it. I find donors like that, right? They don't want everyone just smiling saying everything's great, right? They want open dialogue. What's going on? What's keeping you up at night? What are the challenges? What does your fundraising look like this year? So I would just say, get back to scrappy. Get scrappy in terms of, okay, who's this donor? How can I get in front of them? Is it a Zoom? Is it a phone call? I've never communicated with donors directly via social media, but is it, on social media using certain campaigns that might target different types of donors? Um, Utilize your board and different committees to try to get maybe a live connection where a donor will reply. Or what I've seen is, folks are happy to go a little bit back out into the world and go to events. Nonprofits need to shake it up, I think, and do something fun, different venue. Again, if this person gets 25 invites for the fall and they're going to go to 3, what's exciting about your event? And maybe that's where you get to spend 10 minutes with somebody.
Yeah, as a individual giving person, and especially when I work with smaller, medium-sized clients, I often poo-poo special events, but yeah, thank you. I think I need to kind of shift my thinking on that. Now,
Well,
I've worked with clients that have a golf outing, right? They spend a
right.
year and how much in salaries putting a golf outing together, and they net 10 grand.
So I don't disagree with you. So I think some events need to sunset, right? I actually think the younger generations don't like the galas, right? That's kind of actually a trigger and polarizing thing for some folks that just see it as a huge waste of resources and funding. Um, so I've seen more of a shift towards like smaller house parties, right? Where someone on the board might have a lovely home in an area and they invite folks in, or you know, it's fortunate where the nonprofit has space themselves that folks can come into. So I would say, yes, still events, meetups, something really interesting, but within reason. Because I have too seen just huge over the top events. I've been to them, right? And I think the younger generations aren't missing the fact that, wow, this must have taken a lot to pull off. And is that detracting from the overall mission and impact of this organization?
And I've seen a lot of the fundraisers running around like crazy at the events. They really don't get much chance to talk to the donors because they're doing this, they're doing that. I got to get that. Oh, good to see you. Thank you so much. We'll catch up. Got to go.
Right.
Right. So I love that. What's it? Jeffersonian dinner, right? You know that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've been a part of those as well. Again, a really kind of intimate setting. So the overall notion, right, is that Thomas Jefferson used to bring together people from varying backgrounds at a table, and they would share a meal, and there would be conversation and questions for the table. And so that that idea has been embraced by some nonprofits for, I think, really major donors, prospects to come together, again, maybe in a really interesting home or setting. I once was a part of one. The topic was rigor and relevance with your philanthropy, and it was open to donors to share their stories. I think there's some interesting TED Talks on Jeffersonian dinners if anyone wants to go further down that rabbit hole.
Awesome. Katie, great stuff. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sure, always happy to chat.
How can people get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I also have my websites, pathwayphilanthropic.com, and always welcome messaging through LinkedIn or my email, which is kcollins@pathwayphilanthropic.com.
And you do a lot. Why would people call you? Like, our audiences are primarily fundraisers, of course. So how could you help a fundraiser?
Sure. So I think if you're looking for more of a traditional fundraiser, someone working on really massive campaigns, I am not the lady to call. There's some great, there's tons of great actually consultants out there. I would say I'm unique in that I bring kind of a forward-thinking, innovative approach to fundraising. So if you need someone to kind of do an overall fundraising assessment, someone to kind of come in and look at what are you doing, what's working, what's not, I'm there to be able to help kind of provide some innovative solutions that incorporate all kinds of things from next-gen engagement to corporate partners. I mean, it really runs the gamut because everything's customized to each. But I would say, especially if a nonprofit's at that inflection point where it needs to kind of recalibrate or do something different, I'm that unique perspective that can help.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thanks. Have a good day, Joe.